And we are recording.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us again. My name is Libby. I'm here with my colleague, Dave. We both support APS at the headquarters level, and we've been working real hard on this data dashboard. So we're so excited to be showing you guys this resource that we have available today. Our IT team was able to publish the link to the live data dashboard, the live TV2 version. And so Dave had put that link in the chat. So for those of you that have just joined in the last couple minutes, please feel free to open that dashboard up on your computer as well, so that you can take a look at your own data and follow along with us as we're showing you the different features of Power BI and the Investigator Data Dashboard. So you can see what Dave has up on the screen is the first page that we all will land on, which is the Caseload Detail tab. And as we're moving through Power BI, and the BI stands for Business Intelligence, it's a Microsoft service that allows us to incorporate all of the data from TV2, so we can pull it out into this big report format so that we can better understand the ways in which our caseload is moving through the investigative process, what information is still outstanding or pending in TV2, and also looking at some data visualizations of where we've been with our closed investigations. So Dave's going to do a little bit of driving for me, but I just want to orient you all to just kind of in general what Power BI has to offer. And so as you're moving through the different data visuals, the different tables, just remember that everything is interactive. So when we're looking at this table format that we have right here, you can click on any of the headings and it'll sort based on date, based on alphabetical, based on a number, depending on what the value in that particular field is. And anywhere you see an investigation ID, that's going to link back to TV2. So when you click on it, it opens right to your investigation. And you can either pop in and take a look at what's going on with that investigation. You can update your IFF, your AP interview, maybe add a case note or two. And so hopefully making those two resources linked and movement between them very seamless. As you're thinking about the way that you'd like to view Power BI and just the way that it makes sense for your eyes, if you go to the View dropdown at the top, you can see here that we've got different ways to play around with the size of the screen, the size of the report. You can say fit to width, fit to page, actual size, and it zooms it in and out for you. And also for those of you that prefer a high contrast setting, Power BI has a few different options that allow you to find a contrast setting that suits your preferences. Realizing that some of the high contrast settings might change the ways in which the graphs perform in the tabs as we move along, but just something to keep in mind as you're finding the best settings that work for you. I think, yeah, and then as we're moving along, and when Dave and I are making references to different tabs or different views, that's where you'll follow the tabs at the bottom of the screen, like a big Excel file if you're used to that. Those are how we toggle between the different pages that Dave and I have available. So Dave, I think I'll kick it over to you to talk about caseload detail.
Super duper. So for those of you that have been around for a while, you may remember the 1051 report that used to be run out of the old People legacy. And I think in some of your regions, maybe some of your SHPICs are still running your own developed 1051 that goes out to some staff. So we sort of looked at that as one of the base items that helped us design this new data dashboard, because there was a lot of talk about how staff really enjoyed having that sort of data at their fingertips. So looking at the data dashboard on the caseload detail, you're going to notice that it allows you to sort, as Libby said, by any of these columns by using the little caret. You'll notice at the top, it also shows me to start out this whole 22,107 investigations. So this is showing me statewide right now how many are pending supervisor approval. On your dashboard, you'll only be seeing your work. So before I get into any more nitty-gritty, can I get a volunteer? You can put your name in chat. Someone that has an investigator that has a caseload that has some open work, things you're working on, where you know you're not caught up, but where you might have some work open. Anybody willing to volunteer for tribute to use it as an example? Be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Crystal. Let's see what you got on there. So I'm gonna go over here. So these filters I have available as I am a power user. Um, uh, Supervisors will see their units over in this column. You'll be able to see what your workers see. So I'm going to go ahead and just search for not Chris. Is that you, more DA, Crystal? Let's see what happens. Magical. Ah, there's some good stuff on there. Excellent. Oh. This looks like a good one. So oh yeah, I'm not finding it listed there, Crystal.
It looks like, Dave, you might be on the supervisor filter.
Oh, that would be the why.
Let's
See,
pop up to the investigator one.
That would help a lot. There we go. Not advanced filtering. Also, when you have cold fingers, sort of. Let's try that. There we are. Yay!
Excellent. Thank you again, Crystal.
Okay, thank you, Crystal, for volunteering. So here's what Crystal, when you log in, this is what yours should look like right now, hopefully, for Crystal and for all the other investigators out there. This should be showing your actual work. So Crystal has 17 open investigations. Nothing's pending approval with her supervisor, which is nice. And if we click along our little caseload detail, we have all sorts of bits of information that we can sort. So we can sort by investigation ID, days open. It's another good one to sort by if we wanted to see oldest to newest for work we're doing. AV full name, AP name, intake priorities if you want to see what's due next, when those responses are due for your entire caseload, whether they've been met or not. We're going to look at the next tab to give us more information there. Initial response, which can be really handy to know sort of when the AV initial response was due. Oh. If I scroll over here a little further, and a little scrolly bar here, I have information like when our AP interview is due. If it hasn't been done yet, it's going to be blank. The type that's due when you fill that out. 90-day reason codes. If you have any cases over 90 days, it'll show you what those codes are that are being used. We have the ability to look at when was the last case note entered for that investigation. So we look at, there's 3 investigations here that are fairly new, don't have a case note yet. So if you're going, oh, have I done that case note or not? Great place to look. What allegations we're investigating that investigation. If the investigation requires approval. So if you ever wonder, like, gosh, is this going to need to go to my supervisor or not? There are rules in TIVA 2 that govern what requires supervisor approval, right? So with that, this will tell you, based on what you currently have selected, is it going to require approval? If one of these were to become a substantiation, that would change to review required, because that's one of the rules we have. And then last approval decision, if that went back and forth with your supervisor on the investigation, it would say not approved, and so you'll be able to see the things that have come back to you on this list. Also over here, we have our filters. So, I only have one selected. Come on now, select. There we go. So you can adjust these to show only parts of work. So if you wanted to see only investigations you received before a certain date, maybe you know that there were investigations that were transferred to you from somebody that were that happened before you started with APS. You can adjust this slider as you needed to see things as they came into you earlier or later. When investigations were created, same thing. You slide that to kind of chop your work up into blocks if you want to see things that came in before or after a timer. And this AV initial response due date, same. If you only wanted to see the things that are due in the next little while, you can slide that date up and go, okay, yeah. So if you have a really large list, especially like for supervisors that have an entire unit worth, you can move that down just to show you the blanks. Maybe somebody's out sick to see what things haven't been entered in yet. Now, one thing I'll mention about this data that we're looking at, this data is live up to the last 24 hours. So the data refreshes basically at midnight the day before. So if you go in and do an initial face-to-face and you knock it down for our initial face-to-face drop down here. The next day, it will show up on here as to when and how you did that. If you do it this morning, though, it won't show up until tomorrow's reports. So it doesn't capture in real time, but it's up to the last day. No approval needed. If you want to filter things that did or did not need approval, and if you had something that was pending approval right here, you could also select to show those only on this dashboard. So pretty nifty. Again, this is what investigators see. If you're a supervisor, you can use the filters and you can see everyone who's in your units. Questions about the caseload detail page?
Look like we've got some here in the chat.
Yep.
So it looks like, Kelly, to your question, clicking on the link that Dave put in the chat for this training should take you to the production version of the data dashboard, and then those investigation links should go directly to TIVA 2. And then Matt, I see your question about the supervisor view, how what Dave has up on the board in terms of what Crystal's information looks like isn't quite matching yours. I think we can connect on that maybe afterwards, again, just to play around and make sure that those filters are looking good. So I'll reach out to you then.
Yep, you can hit the erase on any of these to clear all the filters. This bottom filter is currently backdating a little. It isn't showing up through today. So you may need to adjust that. That might make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then Devon's question about criteria for supervisor approval. I believe that's outlined in our policy and procedure on Policy Tech right now. And maybe when there's a moment we can put that information in the chat.
Yeah, again.
And Marvin saying that not seeing any data for themselves. Okay. So again, make sure you're using the link that Dave has up in the chat. We're not going to the test version of the dashboard. We're going to the live version of the dashboard. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, that date that's currently looking at. We'll get that fixed up. That it is backing up a little, which is going to leave a lot of stuff off. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Good. And just as a sort of aside, so this is really designed for investigators. That supervisors can use it as is a great use of the tool. But if you think about other things you'd like as a supervisor or manager, it's like, well, can we add this or that? Probably not to this tool unless it really is investigator based, and then would trickle up to you. Because again, this is their tool. There are the other Power BI tools that supervisors and managers have access to that we can maybe update to better meet your needs that way. All right.
Absolutely. And I think, Dave, before we move on from this screen to Miranda and Ben's question, can we go back to, so in the AV initial response due date, we're so sorry, guys, it's set at a back date right now. And so you can either take that circle on the right-hand side and scoot it all the way over, or what Dave was showing, if you hover your cursor over, there's a little eraser icon that pops up, which is handy to know whenever something's not looking quite right, or you're like, I think I've added too many filters. If you hit that eraser, it'll make sure that all the filters are reset so you can see as much data as possible. And so hopefully for Miranda, Ben, for the rest of you that are like, wait, I've had assignments in the last couple days. Hopefully those will pull forward then there too.
Yeah, and Andrea, for your question, yes, you want to save this link. We will be posting this link on the data page on SharePoint. It'll be out in some documentation as well. At some point in future, we'll probably add a link to the TIVA 2. It's just not currently there for this, but that's a good point. Yeah, please save this, but we will have many places to find once we get everything going.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I appreciate all the questions going on in the chat. Dave and I are going to move on to the next tab. But certainly keep going, and those questions in the chat, we'll try and grab them when we see them. We also have office hours available to discuss this report later on this week, and we will be resources to you all as this is deployed outside of this training as well. So keep those wheels turning, keep those questions coming. All right. So when we look at the investigator dashboard, when we scoot it over to that next tab down below, the AV interview tab, we've got 3 different sections I'm going to highlight for you guys here. And so start to think about the AV interview tab and then the next, the AP interview tab, kind of as a to-do list, right? So based on the information that we have entered into TIVA 2, what's going to pull into these tabs of the dashboard is anything that's outstanding, right? Anything that's still kind of pending work that we need to do related to our AV interview. And so I'll start first. Actually, why don't we go ahead and start on the right-hand side since we've got some information there. Oh, over to the right.
Oh, on the right.
I'll start with our IFFs. And so the information that's pulled forward onto this part of the dashboard is that they're pending interviews. So these are the investigations in TIVA 2 where maybe I've entered my case note, but in that separate part where we enter the specific IFF code and the date and time that we saw our AV, this is where TIVA 2 is going to pull that information into the dashboard saying, hey, here's the date and time that it's due, and either is it pending not yet due, meaning that the date hasn't passed in the calendar yet, or is it pending past due, meaning that the due date itself is a date in the past, and we can just go in and update that date, or, again, just to help us with a scheduling tool here. And so this screen in particular, again, is not saying that nobody's entered their case note on this particular IFF, but just that that particular date and IFF code hasn't been entered. And then when we scoot over to that middle list right there, this is just a list of alleged victims in our investigations that aren't yet linked to person management in TIVA 2. So we've got our name, we've got our date of birth, and then the investigation ID. So I see on this example, for instance, we've got 2 investigations for Margaret Hughes. Perhaps that's the same individual, the same Margaret. I see that name and date of birth are identical there. So that could be something too where I do my research in one investigation and I link there, and then I can come back to my dashboard and be like, oh, I've got one more to do. And so I can pop in and go ahead and link that person there. And Dave, would you mind maybe taking the filter off for the investigator so we can see what the interview incomplete looks like? Thank you. All right, and so this last list over here, again, everyone's list is going to look a little bit different. Right now we're seeing a lot of information for everybody, but the AV interview incomplete is a little bit different than the IFF one, right? Because the IFF that's that first knock at the door, that first phone call that we do. For the interview incomplete, that table on the far left-hand side is saying, okay, we still haven't had a chance to get a hold of our alleged victim, or it's still a required interview, right? We haven't put that not required code in there. And so what this is going to let us do is say, hey, here's what's still outstanding, what's still missing in TIVA 2. We've got the person's name, we've got the city and the zip code where their address was recorded, and then we also have the next IFF due date, right? When do we need to make that next attempt to connect with them? And so hopefully this will be a tool to help you all, again, as you're preparing for your week, preparing to go out into the field and see how your week's going to shake out, to kind of organize yourself in terms of what AV interviews are still outstanding. And then we also have a similar tool in the AP tab. And I'm going to pop in the chat real quick here and see if we've got any questions. Devin, I'm glad to hear that we're feeling good about this one so far. And then to Colina's question, I think, Bill, you were exactly right, but I'm going to clarify that just a little bit in terms of how often things are refreshed. Because for those of us who maybe work an alternate schedule, or for the, or sometimes if we're working on the weekends and stuff like that, technically this information refreshes every business day, right? So the way that this is going to look in production today, right, the live version of this report, means it's everything that I entered into TIVA 2 as of the end of the day on Friday. So if I did some overtime on Saturday, if I had a 24 that I responded to, or I did some overtime on Sunday, that's not going to pull in just yet, but I will see any stuff I did over the weekend on Tuesday morning, right, because we need to wait for that next full business day.
Yep. And again, all the things showing up on your dashboard should be, at least on like this page, are actionable, right? I know I can click this link. It'll take me to this investigation once I get that interview done, right? And I can make sure it takes me right to that piece of work to actually do it. So hopefully that'll help save you some organization and some clicks.
Absolutely. And so I think just elaborating a little bit again on what we talked about in that AV interview tab, we have some really similar items that you guys can use in the AP interview tab, which is the unlinked alleged perpetrators. We've got a list there. And then the AP interview where in TIVA 2 it's listed as incomplete. Again, your case note might be in there, but we're looking for that date and that code in that other screen. And again, we've got the city, we've got the zip code pulling in to really kind of help see if we can figure out where we're driving to. And then we also have the date as well to kind of help us figure out, all right, how close are we getting to that, 60-day goal of getting out and talking to that AP. And I saw Dave just popping around showing you guys where those dates are pulling from.
All right. So next, let's talk about this awesome monthly summary tab. So first, again, a little small, so I'm going to go up here and fit to width so we can see a little better. And so this shows us on a monthly basis, and currently we're looking statewide, month to month, how many investigations came in, were created, versus how many were completed or closed. So if I scroll all the way down to just 2023, I can see down here that we've had some start of the year, our incoming versus our closures was a little high. February started getting a little caught up there. For your own caseload, this is going to be really handy because you can then track month to month to month how well you're doing with what's coming in the door versus what you're completing. This does include anything that's been transferred to you as well. Doesn't break it out though. Right, so an open case on your investigations is an open investigation on your caseload, and it just looks at, hey, when did I get it versus when was it completed, and it shows those two dates. Again, you can filter this as you need with the handy-dandy filters over here on the side to break out if you want to break that work out a little further. And down below, we have this awesome little graph that shows you your initial face-to-faces and how well the priorities, you've been meeting the priorities for the response times. So I'm going to zoom this out just a little more because one of our dips goes down below what we had selected. So again, we're only showing the top part of that graph over time, so you can shrink that up, again, if you're going to look at a shorter piece of the graph. So here we go. Come on. Ooh, shrink. There we go. So if you hover over these lines, at any point, you can see what the data is referring to. So right here, this looks like November of last year. We had a little dip in meeting our priority response times. We had 3 holidays in there, and people sick, whatever. But we move back up here, and we show that back up to almost 100% on many things, 100% on the 24-hour responses. Again, we have our QA of that 95 there that sort of give us a hit towards. This is a great way to keep yourself on track for your own caseload. How well am I doing for meeting my my expectations, for meeting my initial face-to-face timeliness? And ideally, your line will be just one big overlapping line of 100%. If it's not, it shows you exactly where or when one was missed. If you think the data is incorrect, go check the data in TIVA 2 and say, well, it's showing here that I missed one. What investigation? You can check your investigations for December and see if maybe you just did a typo by a day. It happens, right? So any data that's in here, pulling directly from TIVA 2, and any data that isn't frozen basically can be updated and would reflect here. All right? Questions about this tab? We have our yearly findings tab. This is a nifty tab. So again, I'm going to go over here to view, fit to width, make it a little easier to view. This shows us on a yearly basis. Again, this is showing the entire state currently, but yours will show yours only. How well we did with our findings. So over here we have financial exploitation. Again, you can scroll over any one to get more in-depth data. So maybe substantiate versus unsubstantiate across all of our allegation than APS. Also shows us a lovely pie chart here of summarizing all of this data. And then finally, we break it out for you of the substantiateds that are not self-neglect. So statewide, with self-neglect, we're at 8.7. Without self-neglect, 1.3. Right, so we really, overall, don't substantiate as much nearly on other cases outside of self-neglect. Good information to have. Again, you can break this down over time for yourself and supervisors, this should show again for your unit. I see where 2003 isn't finished yet, so our numbers are fairly small coming into the year. And finally, we have this yearly services summary. Again, I'm going over here to view, fit to width to make it easier to view. This shows us a really cool thing about the services offered, accepted, and completed for your caseload. So we can go over here and again hover over any of these little graphs. It's going to tell us how many services were offered, how many were accepted, how many were completed. And ideally, these little mountains should follow each other pretty closely, especially if we're offering only the things we think are reasonable and optional. Ideally, these would almost roller coaster on top of each other, if not be a solid line, ideally, that we offered only the things that they needed and we knew they'd accept. So it's a good way to track how well am I doing with what I'm offering. And if you want to know about specific things, you could just sort these by clicking over here. How am I doing with my AAA referrals? Are people accepting those when I offer them? Or if I go down here to Meals on Wheels, I can select only it, or I can hold down Control. I can also select multiple things at once to check how I'm doing with the services I'm offered, what they're accepting, and then what I'm completing. Questions about this tab?
We had some really good feedback and questions come out of the group that we presented to earlier this morning, particularly about this screen. And so for some of you, you might be looking at your service list going, wait, what is that service? Or especially looking at kind of Dave's screen where we're looking at so much information all at once. So with protective services, as APS has been its own division and as we've made changes in TIVA 2, the protective services screen has really evolved over time. And so for those of us that have been here since the beginning of TIVA 2 in 2019, you might see some services on your investigation history where you're like, man, I haven't offered that or worked through that in a while. But it's because, again, we've changed the way we've defined services. Some services have come in and out of scope of what we've been able to offer to our vulnerable adults. And what Dave has up on the screen is that feature in TIVA 2 on the toolbar that has a little slide out that reminds us what the protective service list currently looks like, how we describe that protective service, and what we mean when we say that that service was completed at the time the investigation was closed. So if there's any concern, again, around why certain services are pulling in or looking a certain way, and maybe it's not something that is currently in your arsenal or something that you're offering right now, it's very likely a service that we historically did offer, and so we want to record that data and provide that data to you guys as a reflection of the work we've done in the past.
All right, any questions about the services summary tab? The last tab we have down here is the Help tab. There are some links to how to use Power BI, and some of them will work for you. Others you don't have access to. But ultimately, we did provide you in the email today. It'll also be up on our SharePoint page. Is the user guide, and it will walk you through all the awesomeness we're talking about today. Get hands-on. As Libby mentioned, we will also have those office hours for drop-in later this week.
Absolutely. It doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat right now, but on my notes, Dave, I did want to make sure we covered how we can export the data.
Yes.
And so if you wouldn't mind, I think caseload details a perfect place to put that. So those of you might be thinking like, okay, this looks pretty cool in Power BI, but maybe I want to play around with it in Excel, or I want to pull it out of Power BI again so I can cross things off my to-do list or edit it a little bit. So what Dave is showing you right now are some features that can sometimes be hidden unless we bring our cursor to the top right corner of whatever data visual we want to look at. And so when he clicks on the triple dot right there, we have this export data, which is the first selection at the top. So when you click on that, Power BI gives you the option to bring this data out into Excel. And so you just, at this point, I don't make any changes because the summarized data and the file format has worked historically for the ways in which we need to analyze our data, to play around with it in Excel. And so you just hit the export button right there. It downloads a file for you outside of Power BI. It puts it like Dave has in his download bar there. And so you just open it up. I think this file is fairly large, so it might take a moment. Your guys' files might not be quite that size, but it'll allow, again, for you to see the exact same information in an Excel format in case that is something you want to share with your supervisor, in case it's something you want to use, again, as like a to-do list where you're knocking things off, and hopefully just enhances our ability to play around with the data. There you go. That's what that looks like. And then as you can see in that top line right there, row 1, it has all of the filters that you've added. So it kind of brings that information forward a bit just to remind us what it looks like.
Yeah. One of the things, again, like if you want to run this like on your case notes, like when was my last case note run, and really be able to dig into that, is a really helpful way. Like I can see like what case notes are still outstanding. What investigations don't we have case notes on? You can sort that out when the first case notes were versus the last case notes. And for my own caseload, really helpful information if I have some blanks on here that I still need to make case notes in those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like no blanks on the, yeah.
Everyone's entered case notes. That's great.
That's awesome.
I see that Devin had another question here in terms of when we export it, does it continue to update or do we need to re-export it each time? So I'm going to interpret your question, Devin, and you can let me know in the chat if I kind of missed the mark there. But this idea that we're grabbing data from Power BI and we're putting it into Excel, think of that Excel document as a snapshot, right? It's kind of taking a copy of what Power BI looked like in that moment. And so we can play around with it in Excel. We can, again, make some updates or changes in Excel, but it's not going to feed back to Power BI and vice versa. And so Power BI is always going to be, this techie term, our source of truth, right? It's going to show us what the data looks like before we pull it into Excel. And the true source of truth is actually our Tiva 2 system, because Power BI is just interpreting what we have in Tiva 2.
Yeah, and if you go in, if you find something on here that doesn't match what you think it should be, go check your source of truth, right? Is there a typo in it happens easily, right? We get typo, we go in and put the wrong data in there. But if you ever do find that the data is actually wrong, please let us know as soon as possible. Because we'll want to research that, and figure out to get it right, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And actually on that topic, some of you guys might be thinking as you're poking through in your dashboard, well, if I run into issues, if I need to reach out to somebody, what's the best way? And so right now, Dave and I would prefer, if you have questions, or again, if issues arise and you want us to dig in a little bit for you, let's go ahead and send in a help ticket. This is going to be a new report for us. Dave and I want to make sure that we're not getting things lost in the shuffle. And so help desk is the easiest way for him and I to not just communicate with you all, but actually communicate up to IT so that we can better understand what we might need to address. So a help ticket would be best. And your local help desks will know to send that over to Dave and I so we can take a closer look. Are there any other questions or any other scenarios Dave and I can run through while we are in the room together today? All right.
Super.
Well, it sounds like we've got some rock star students. I'm so glad that you all were able to join us today. Thank you so much for carving out your time this afternoon. I know you all are incredibly busy. Please feel free, like I said, as you are taking a chance to dive into this, if things aren't showing up the way that you expect to, don't forget to play around with those filters on the side so that the dates are as wide as possible. We're working with IT to make sure we don't have to do that extra step of unfiltering the filter, and that should be out and fixed really soon. If anyone would like to chat some more one-on-one, please feel free to hang on the call. We've got some time until 3 o'clock, but for the rest of you, please go enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll connect again soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.